Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning. We are here for the additive collection development. Yes, librarians are already doing that. My name is Peggy Kane. I am an associate professor. I'm also head of the Resources Acquisition and Metadata Services Department for the University of Alabama at Birmingham. To begin with, let's start off with a little bit of an overview, give you some ideas to who we are and things like this. Our agenda this morning, as you can see, I'm not going to read it, will be, of course, an introduction, and then we'll go through the basics and just so an overview of some things, and then see where we are from here. So who is UAB? We are an R1 public institution located in the state of Alabama. Our FTE runs approximately 20 to 21,000. We have several professional schools on campus, and we are home to one of the largest academic medical centers in the United States. UAB Libraries is an academic unit of the institution. UAB Libraries has an academic library, a health sciences library, 2 hospital libraries, Museum of the Health Sciences Libraries, a university archive, and a historical library. And yes, my unit, my department serves all of these particular areas. So let's first, so we're all on the same page, let's begin with an overview and overall definition of 2 items that come into play when you talk about collections, maintaining, development, management, however you want to put it. These both came from the recent publication and the name of the publication is down on the right-hand side. So collection management, if you think of it as an overall umbrella, it gathers all the information, the communication, the policy, evaluation regarding acquisition, retention, the whole 9 yards for a given or a particular university or library community. Collection development is actually a sub-piece or a portion of collection management, and it has primarily to do with decisions that relate to and work with acquisitions, weeding, maintaining, evaluating those particular collections. So in the beginning, or as a starting point, libraries will have what we call collection development policies. These are standard statements. Sometimes they're short. Sometimes you'll have multiple. It depends upon the university, the school, the institution, the philosophy of the libraries. They are always a good piece to begin with when you have a discussion with a user or someone coming into the library, faculty member, student, researcher, who is requesting items or trying to find out why you are or are not buying something, or why you have maintained it or you've gotten rid of it. A collection development policy is also a good way or a good backup, because you now have something that tells you the coverage. It will cover the books, journals, primary sources, anything format-wise that your university or the library will purchase, license, or have in their collection. It includes and relates back to the mission statement of the university or the institution. It will also include the mission statement of the library, or in my case, the library system or the library unit as a whole. It will, of course, have the purpose of the policy, whether it's to add or evaluate resources for the social behavioral sciences. It will speak to things like whether or not textbooks are purchased or not purchased, the types of materials, whether or not the focus is electronic or print. It will have all of those pieces that you need to put together to have some sort of overview. It will also speak to the audience. It will give you an overview. We serve the University of Alabama at Birmingham, community. Our focus is our students, faculty, staff, and researchers. This is how we relate to and how we provide service and fulfill our obligation to our community. When we look at this, we talk about all the decisions about, oh, well, now that means I've got a policy in place, I can do this. Well, that's fine. But what you have to remember is anytime you put anything in place, whether it's a collection development policy, whether it's a discussion about a textbook, however you want it, whether it's serving, purchasing, supporting curriculum, or your research initiatives, or anything along those lines, every decision, every statement is related to a cost. The cost must be sustainable. It must be something that is within the budget and then can go forward for 2 to 3 years, depending upon what the policy of your university or your institution is. Because as we look at this, we need to look at it from an overall standpoint, not just the current year. And then you need to look at it and consider the impact across all of your user communities. So what that means is, well, I've got a health sciences title, so that means I need to evaluate it against the academic. It depends. What is your academic curriculum look like? Does it have something that may be a precursor or a feeder or something that is health related that could potentially use this resource? Prime example for my institution is anatomy. When we look at resources for anatomy, I have to look at kinesiology, which is out of the School of Education. I have to look at CAS, College of Arts and Sciences, which is has biology, chemistry, some of the other undergraduate degrees that are health related. I have School of Nursing, I have public health, I have, of course, medicine. So I have just run the gambit of several of my schools and several of my users. I'm not limiting it to one side of the campus or one particular area. So you need to be aware of those pieces when you start looking at your collections. So now let's get into some of the nitty-gritty of what we need to talk about. Remember again, everything counts, and of course, everything costs. So you want to, if you're looking at weeding a physical location or a physical resource, so you need to, some of the considerations you may look at is, what is the cost to replace? Is that cost something that the university and the library can support? The ability to replace, okay, well, that's fine and dandy if you want to change and buy a new book, or you want to replace something that was published in an older format. Is it available in another format? Is that book that you wanted to purchase still being used? Is it still available for purchase? It may or may not be. So you need to look at those pieces when you talk about your cost. You need to look at whether or not this is a valuable resource. And what I mean by that is, okay, so I have a mathematical book that was published in the 1950s. Is it a core resource that I still have faculty who use that information, who rely on those pieces? For example, with medical, with my medical resources, is this something that is unique? What is this? Is it possible to even look at it and replace it? Also, when you look at reading a physical item, is everything available elsewhere? So if I replace it with an electronic item, then gee golly, what happens to those particular pieces, the supplement, the ads, the marketing information, all of those pieces that may or may not have been digitized or included in a new electronic collection. It may not be necessary to have an ad in an electronic journal, resource. However, You may need to use it for social behavioral sciences or business and marketing, or even in English 101 class when they're looking at what did something look like back in the 50s, or what did it look like 100 years ago. So those are the pieces that when you start looking at these things, that's what you need to take into consideration and evaluate and be aware of when you do it. Not everything can be replaced, and if it can be replaced, what is the cost? Now, another piece is when you're looking at canceling or potentially eliminating electronic resources. So there are several considerations in that area as well. Do you want to cancel or eliminate an ebook or something that you have already purchased? Is this something that's already purchased that's not taking up any shelf space, and it has no impact on anything except, and the access is still available? Is this something you want to eliminate from your collection? That's a question. When you're canceling something that is a subscription or has an ongoing cost, then you need to look at what agreements you have in place. Is this particular resource a part of a package, a part of a collection, a part of a larger unit that you want to maintain? If so, then what will happen to that cost when you do it? If I cancel X, Y, and Z journals, will my cost go up? Will my cost be reduced? Will I have to pay a penalty with that because I'm now reducing my cost? So there's all sorts of different pieces that you have to look at. When we talk about counting everything, you have to look at your cost. The same holds true whenever you add, purchase, license, subscribe to, whatever you want to say, call it, adding new resources. And there are different ways to add it. We're not going into those particular right now because I'm not getting into the acquisition side of it. We're just going to look at what you're doing as far as adding, purchasing, or licensing. So is it available? If so, do you have to purchase a whole collection? If you have to purchase a whole collection, what is the overlap? What is the cost going forward? Can you maintain it? So all of these are driven by what is available, what can you afford, what is the policy, and then once you put something in place, will you be able to sustain, maintain it? Because once you open that door and allow or provide the resources for your user, whether it's a faculty who's relying on it for their syllabus and their course, or whether it's a student who is using it in their capstone project, or a researcher who's in the middle of another, their research project and are going to need access to this particular resource for additional information, for anything. So you need to always remember when you do it, cost is a big consideration for these pieces. So let's look at analysis. And when we talk about analysis of resources, we always look at what they call the quantitative and the qualitative. And for those of us like me, who didn't particularly like all these statistical pieces, and oh my gosh, when I was a science major and an undergraduate, and then had to turn around and take these pieces in graduate school, it was like, really? I am not a numbers person. I dislike it. But you need to be able to look at this and analyze it in both ways. So quantitative, to me right now, having made that statement, it's now to me the easy piece, because you look at the numbers and it becomes a spreadsheet in your evaluation. You're able to look at it, you're able to plug and play, you're able to manipulate, you're able to provide concrete data for your users that has this piece in it. The second side of that is qualitative. Qualitative takes a little bit more work. So when you look at a qualitative analysis, you need to be able to talk about what is your curriculum? What are your expectations of your users? What are your faculty doing? Are they in the process of trying to apply for a grant, dealing with this resource? Is your course being taught every 2 years? Is it a core piece that everybody has to do? Is it a special core, or I don't want to say project, but curriculum piece that is unique, that we need to have this, but only a small amount of people need this valuable resource. So you need to know what's actually happening at your school and your curriculum. Where are they? What's going on with this? So when we look at these pieces, they should be considered as hand in hand. You need to know the quantitative and then build it out with your qualitative. Are they both useful? Yes. They always say when we talk about pieces or description that the qualitative is the story. I do not like using that analysis. To me, it's just adding detail. So when I think of a resource, do I have the chair of a department who is an editor, or is this something that is a key resource for tenure and promotion at my institution? That could be a qualitative. My use may not substantiate the numbers, but if this is a key resource that's key to my folks going up for promotion and tenure across the university, or if it provides value, or I've got, it's a key resource that they need to have for accreditation. You need to be able to look at these pieces and provide that additional information when you evaluate and analyze content across your collection. So let's talk about the easy piece from my standpoint, the quantitative value, which is, hey, I can gather numbers, I can do this, I can interpret it, I can slice and dice, I can do whatever I want to do. So generally when you have statistics, you're able to see, oh, well, I've got statistics for my electronic resources. I can see how many times this journal was used. I can see how much full text. I can go in and tell you, well, my cost is this, and I can evaluate as to how many full text articles we'll pull out. I can go through and say, well, if I want to add a title, I can say, well, this actual particular journal has been requested through interlibrary loan this many times, and this is the cost that I'm having to pay for a copyright clearance center. And because I've gone over the number of usable, times I can get something from this journal without having to pay that additional fee for royalty, then that value is there. We also have what we call counter usage statistics. And I've got another slide that will actually link you back out to what Project Counter is. So they provide value reports that help you and provide this data, these numbers for you. It's easy to pull, sort of. It's a lot of work, but it's there. You have to be able to go through, interpret, and see there are several different reports. There's several different pieces to it. You have to look at whether or not it's a journal, a book, you want to do a platform, we've got multimedia. So there's all sorts of different pieces when you do it. The value of these reports is incredible, because when you go through and you look at it, this data is used for iPads. It's used for other surveys like ACRL, ARL, some of the other regional consortiums that we are in, like Association of Southeastern Research Libraries. So there are all these pieces that the counter usage is important for. So when you slice and dice it, you have that data and you can use it to provide and answer these particular pieces. This slide that I've put up right here gives you an example of one of a counter report. And if you'll notice down at the bottom, it says it's a TR Journal 1. So a TR, which is a Journal 1 counter report, shows that it's all of the journal requests, excluding open access gold titles. So when you go through this, those are the pieces that you're going to have to look at. You have to look at, all right, what is it? It's a journal. What does the journal piece include? It includes this data. Does it include open access gold? Does it show my turnaways? What does it actually show? So what I've done is I've pulled on this one report that comes up, it shows the titles in two different numbers or two different information points. So if you go over and look at your metric type, it shows you the total item requests. And then for the same title, it shows you the unique item requests. So how many times was this particular journal or, requested? How many times did someone go in and request an article out of this particular journal? So your total cost could be $10 and you have, two articles, or in this case, $2.75. So you take that and then divide it in. But then for some of the other reasons and what you're looking at when you deal with iPads or you deal with anything else, like ACRL or ARL, you may or may not be asked to look at the total item request. You want to look at the unique item request. So I may have a user that pulls 5 articles out of the journal 3D printed, okay? That's going to come up under my total, but it's not necessarily going to come up under my unique, because I'm looking at my unique, it's going to be unique visits, unique users. It's going to look at how many times did somebody go in and look at those pieces. So when you start looking at the information to slice and dice it, you need to be aware and be able to evaluate those different pieces and understand the difference. Am I going into the weeds with this right now? No. This information is available at the site, and my recommendation is you go through it, you look at it, and you see, because it will provide great information, value, overview of what you're looking at and what you're going to be expected to respond to or provide as justification for adding or deleting or weeding or whatever you want to do with your journal, with your book, with your multimedia, with your database. So when we go through again with our electronic resources, as I say, your counter statistics in practice, theoretically, it is a standard count. Sometimes we appreciate our vendors, but sometimes the interpretation is a little bit different. It depends upon the type of content or whether or not it may be a cell press or an academic journal. Are they all listed in the same thing? Are they going from here? So there may be a piece of it that may or may not be standard across everything. Is the vendor compliant? You may have a small press, especially in one of the professions, that they do not gather or provide counter statistics. I had an interesting conversation with a vendor one time who said, "Oh, no. We're not going to be going to the government for such and such." And I made a comment. I was like, that's not the point. The point of it is, are you gathering these statistics? Are they compliant with this? Oh, they had no idea what I was talking about. And so I was not able to use their information in my analysis when I went to go through and look at it. A way to go through and pull this information together is a SWOT analysis. And I'm sure many of you have used that when you've looked at other things. As I say, several ways to slice and dice. What do you need it for? What can you do? And if you will look at this down at the bottom, that is your project counter org site. My recommendation again would be to go look at that, take a look, see what it is, get your feet wet. Do you need to remember everything? No. Do I remember everything? No. And if they change something, you have to go see it. But it will help when you go through and you look at these reports or trying to determine what the best report is. This is a great place to begin. For your benefit, what I've done is when we've had to look at canceling, weeding, and adding our electronic journals, this is an example of what I created as a SWOT analysis. I used a flat fee, which would be the cost if I had to go elsewhere to get it, because I had 10 articles, I'm allowed 5 out of this journal. So what would each additional 5 articles cost me if I went through and did it? So looking at this piece, we looked at that versus, okay, so if I've got a high cost and a low use, what am I looking at? What was my base point? So I'm looking at the actual cost of the journal. I'm analyzing it. Is it better to look at it versus the $40 or the $50 or the $60 or $74 per article going through the ILL route, or is it cheaper for me to subscribe to it and keep it that way? So when you look at these pieces, you need to be able to look at everything. Again, this is all quantitative and not qualitative. Your print resources. You can grab the information out of your ILS, your circulation, however you want to do it. At one point, I think some libraries were even, if you found it out on a table, did you put a tick mark on something? What were you doing to maintain it? Also, your interlibrary loan data again. And as this sounds very silly, sometimes just scanning a shelf. What does the shelf look like? Does it have an inch worth of dust on it that shows that this stuff has never been used or hasn't been checked out? So, and then 2, what's going on with your peer institutions? Do you have other institutions that you usually work with? Do you have others in your state that are your peers within your state? Are there peer institutions that have been identified by your institution, where you have other universities where your university said, when we look at and evaluate X, Y, and Z, these are what we consider our peer institutions. That information, when you go through and do it, will be available, if not on the website, it should be available internally, so you can see and evaluate and use those as points to consider whenever you look at your print information and whether or not you should maintain it, add it, or anything along those, weed it, or anything along those lines. Qualitative is a little bit more challenging, because qualitative, you're going to have to jump through a few more hoops. So the question would be, who on campus is or would be using whatever that resource is? Is it something that, you've got one faculty member that wants? Is it a key resource for a particular discipline? A few years ago, I had the dean of the School of Business contacted us about adding a particular journal to our collection. Did that journal have a lot of usage? No, but it was a key resource for his actual area of research, plus some valuable resources and research that was being done by others in the school. So it was used when they went up for, for in promotion and tenure decisions. So it became a key resource for those particular reasons, not necessarily whether or not the use was high. And then two, what is the professional partnership with your faculty or the chair or your user community? Is this something that you have a personal, and what I mean by that is the chair is the editor. UAB began this publication 20 years ago and then passed it forward to somebody else. You have to be aware of those partnerships and be able to take that into consideration whenever you're looking at some of these pieces. That is valuable data because you don't want to get rid of something that someone has a vested interest in. And then, of course, your research initiatives. What is happening across your university? Again, going back to when you looked in the beginning, we talked about collection development policies and that beginning. So where's your university going? What are they doing? What are they looking at? What are the schools looking at? What are your faculty internally and externally looking at? So it needs to be a conversation with the liaisons, with the faculty, with what is happening with your university. Where are we going? What do you see coming down the pike? And then, of course, there's always the timing of associated courses. You may have a course or a program that doesn't take effect or isn't taught for a year or more. So then you need to be able to take that into consideration whenever you look at something. Is it a film course that they have a course that's tied to an event across campus that happens every 2 years? So how are all of these pieces of this puzzle going into this? Where are we going from here? These are all key whenever you look at something like this. And then your peer institutions. Again, does anybody else have it? Who has it? Is it, if I have a faculty member who needs X, Y, and Z, and I get rid of it, what will happen to it? Will I be able to provide this in a timely manner? What can be done to make sure that our users' needs are met in the time frame that they needed? So those are all things that you need to look at. If it's the last copy across 10 states and no one else has it, and you will not be able to get this content back, is this something that you want to maintain? Is it important for your university library to keep this in their collection? Do you have a supplement that is no longer available or has not been published in any other format, from print to electronic? What do you have? Where do you go? So those are key resources, and some of the things you need to do. Is this trivial? No. This needs to be used as a portion or part of your evaluation when you deal with and you look at resources. So let's talk about some possible aids, and I'm going to put that in quotes. Because when you talk about these things, you need to always take them, as you say, with a grain of salt. And you'll notice on the last thing I say foolproof. Software is good and great, but how far will it go? How readily can you modify it to your specs? What can you do? Is it something where you can press the magic button and you no longer have to do any work? Those are things that you need to keep in mind when you look at it. Those are just some of the examples that have come across my desk that I have heard, worked with, in the past few years. Is this an end-all list? No. Another piece that comes into play, very easy to look at, is OCLC World Cup. So back to the slide before where we talked about who has it. How easy will it be to get it? Where is it? Databases could include books in print, duties for the health sciences, and the academic would be choice. So look at those things where you have outstanding titles. Where are you going from there? For the serials or the journals, there's Ulrichs. So there are different tools and different possibilities that help you and provide additional information when you go through this process. My recommendation is you always have more than one avenue or more than one way to look at this stuff. So look at books in print, look at WorldCat, look at duties, look at WorldCat, look at your peer institutions for the health sciences. Who has this? Where are they? And if they have it, do they lend it out in ILL? Because that becomes another piece. So there's all sorts of factors when you look at it. Nothing is foolproof. You have to go through and do it. Do what we would say is your due diligence. You go through everything. You work through it the best you can. You provide everything in a format that you can go back 2 years from now and pull it up, because you may not have the money this year. You may have to wait 2 years. You may have a backlog on weeding and you may have to wait. So there's all sorts of things that happen through this piece, and you need to be able to slice and dice and go through the way you need to. Again, my name is Peggy Kane. I'm at UAB. My email address is at the bottom, and I just want to say thank you for everything. And if you need anything, just let me know. Thank you very much.